sided with you overwhelmingly to repeal Senate Bill 5. And then on issue 3, with the fallout of Obamacare and healthcare, as they call it.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly that was a resounding
It's a
support
pejorative.
of that.
It's a pejorative, Jim.
Well, isn't it a message to both Washington that they didn't like overreach on healthcare? They didn't like overreach for the Republicans here?
But it's in our lexicon. You just referred to it as Obamacare. It's a pejorative.
I added that to what critics call it.
And it's insulting because it's been widely reported as such. It becomes part of the lexicon that it's a negative. And because I mentioned this before you came, that we invested heavily into the Issue 2 campaign because the risk of losing was so concerning to us. We had to ensure that we won, and frankly win big, so that it sent a message to our friends in the General Assembly to reach across the aisle and work together constructively on these kinds of issues that are fundamental policy issues. Lou Blessing and Bill Batchelor can disagree with me on collective bargaining, but at the end of the day, that disagreement is founded in policy question. As it relates to Issue 3, this was more of a popularity contest that, as you know, as you've reported, had no impact and will have no impact on the course of the state as it relates to the President's health care initiative.
So there's no message from independents about overreach by Democrats?
But it does have an impact on Medicaid, and Medicare, and other health care issues that you've also reported on. We wanted to focus our resources on Issue 2, rather than to dilute our resources. I believe, and certainly people can disagree with me, I believe that if we'd engaged in that debate on Issue 3, if we had the resources to direct into Issue 3, we would have certainly seen a more competitive race. Just 2 weeks ago, you saw it was still Issue 3 polling under 48% because there was no information. So if there's no information, voters will just respond emotionally. And thus far, over the course of the last couple of years, the defense of the health care initiative has been in the courts and not in the court of public opinion. I gave this really long speech about breast cancer survivors and kids on their parents' health care. And when you talk about these health care issues on the most basic level, we win those debates. If you were to ask an independent Wapakoneta if they're going to stand with the insurance companies or they're going to stand with the breast cancer survivor, I suspect they're going to choose the latter. We didn't have time or the resources to engage in that rhetorical debate. And to their credit, the Republicans jumped on that horse and collected the signatures in the hopes that it would distract voters from Issue 2 and turn out the Republican base. And we did such an extraordinary job through our coalition, Republican, Democrat, Independent, across the labor movement and beyond, that we were able to educate those independents as it relates to Issue 2.
Considering the landslide win on Issue 2, do you now look back and wish maybe you had diverted some of those resources to Issue 3?
Oh, I spend my whole life wishing. I tell you what, I get up every day and I have to drive by the governor's residence on Parkview and Baxley, and I think that, had the folks worked so hard last night, worked that hard last year, if I and others, we'd be in a much different position today. The fact of the matter is we fell, 70,000 votes short, I think it was, 1.7% out of almost 4 million votes cast. Yeah, sure, I wish, but, wish you don't get you very far. Doing is what's most important. And over the course of next year, we will do, accordingly, what needs to be done to lift communities and working families up and push back on an agenda that includes Senate Bill 5 that Ohioans have chosen to push back on as overreaching and define as overreaching.
And moving forward, how do you make what some might call a coalition of convenience, and that everyone had a common enemy, and turn this into a true coalition that will work to help Democrats in 2012?
It's a great question, and as you know, I don't know what the percentage being quoted today is about the number of Ohioans who actually belong to a collective bargaining unit, public and private. I suspect it's close to or less than 20%. You have 80% of the rest of Ohioans who largely came out and supported our effort yesterday. So it is a coalition, not of convenience, but a coalition of Ohio communities. It's the people you sit with at the football or baseball game. One of the reasons why we were successful is because of John Casey. The fellow just can't help himself. And how he defined teachers in Ashtabula, suggesting he was going to break the backs of unions. How he responded at that EPA meeting way back in January, recounting his traffic citation from a Columbus police officer. How his team reacted to Marlene Quinn and her appearance in a television commercial. They personalized this issue in a negative way that Ohioans responded to. You know, Joe wrote a column once about how things seem like they're getting uglier from a political standpoint. And in this case, I think people responded to the behavior of the Kasich team and the team of the Building a Better Ohio team, and that helped us win. Anytime you have a firefighter knocking on your door and your house isn't on fire, to ask you to support an issue, chances are you're going to vote with the firefighter. Anytime a teacher knocks on your door and talks about these issues in a way that we can fully appreciate and understand, chances are you're going to win that race, and that's what happened with
Well, why do these police, firefighters, and independents stick with you next year?
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? Or why do you believe they will?
Oh, sure. I think over the course of the last 35, 40 years, since the emergence of the Reagan Democratic Coalition and those folks who voted primarily on middle-class blue-collar issues and not so much on social issues, the emergence of that coalition and their erosion from the Democratic base over time, and tonight, or yesterday rather, gives us a chance to reflect on why they left and how we can keep them in our new coalition. This is a syndic coalition of firefighters, police officers, teachers, labor activists, and older Ohioans, younger Ohioans, Latinos, African Americans. It gives us a great opportunity. Let me give you an example. In Cincinnati last night, Cincinnati City Council started the day having 5 of 9 Republicans. 5 of the 9 members of Cincinnati City Council were Republicans. They ended the day, the Republican party did, with only 1 Republican Cincinnati councilman being reelected. And that Republican supported the repeal of Senate Bill 5. For the first time in history, Cincinnati has a majority African-American council, 1 openly gay councilman, and an 8-to-1 Democratic advantage. You don't win in Hamilton County and Cincinnati just by pointing a finger at your Republican colleagues and blaming all the problems on him or her. You win in Cincinnati, as you do in Wapakoneta or Port Clinton or Fremont or Zanesville, where Democrats won last night, by the way, by talking about issues that matter most to those communities. And in this case, the repeal of Senate Bill 5 and the investment in the middle class resonated in big communities and in small, by and large. And what we also saw, where we fell short in some races, that local candidate did not publicly link themselves to Senate Bill 5 and its repeal. This had a huge impact last night. And there's a lesson not just for Republicans, but for Democrats. Let us not lose our way, and let us keep this coalition intact and moving forward. I don't know many Columbus police officers or Cincinnati firefighters who will consider voting for John Kasich again, but I bet you there's a few who could vote Republican again. And our job is to cultivate the relationship, to reinvest in that relationship, and never take those people for granted.
Speaking of coalitions, Rich Trumke yesterday said that the AFL-CIO, organized labor, will look friendly upon Republicans who stood with you this time around. What do you think about that?
Oh, I'm delighted that last night Bill Sykes was at a Democratic function and received a standing ovation. That kind of courage is not often seen in the Ohio General Assembly. That kind of courage is not often seen among Ohio statewide elected officials. And I'm appreciative of Bill's work to defeat Senate Bill 5.
So do you give Bill Sykes a free
I'll
pass?
spend most of my time not extolling the virtues of one Bill Sykes, because like me, he does a pretty good job of doing that himself. like I said, like me. But I'll remind you that Dave Yost wrote a letter to the Fraternal Order of Police just a year ago, committing himself to the right to collectively bargain. Literally stuck the letter under the doors of members of the Fraternal Order of Police who were attending their statewide convention, and said the following: make no mistake about it, there will be debates about next year about public pension and collective bargaining. Because of my unique understanding of what we do together, he was at the time the Delaware County prosecutor, I can and will be an effective, articulate advocate for the FOP, laying out the arguments about why public safety should be off limits, even if the policymakers choose to consider changes to other areas of collective bargaining. Take out Dave Yost's name, insert Josh Mandel's name. Take out Josh Mandel's name, insert Mary Taylor's name. We will hold those people accountable who stood shoulder to shoulder with Governor Kasich, Speaker Batchelder, and President Niehaus, and wasted a year in our state. We could have been going about the process of building our state, working together, and building a broad coalition. Just 4 years ago, more Republicans voted for Governor Ted Strickland's budget than voted against it. Almost unanimous among that caucus. And look what we've become. So I'm not going to spend much time worrying about Bill Sykes for the next year. I'll be spending a lot of time worrying about Josh Mandel and Dave Yost and Ted and John Kasich and Bill Batchelder and Tom Niehaus. I'm very grateful for Randy Gardner, Republican from Wood County. I'm grateful that Bill Sykes, Republican from Hamilton County. I'm grateful that other Republicans whom I've mentioned in the past, and if you give me their names today, I'll mention them today, stood up for working families. I hope now we'll do the same next year in the support of Senator Sherrod Brown and President Barack Obama, because we need partners who continue to carry the mantle in Washington on behalf of those families that Bill Sykes declared through the course of this campaign that he cared about, as do I.